Well, here I am again. It's Marcy, your instructor, and we're about ready to get started. I just want to welcome you all and a question for you. Who was here for yesterday's sessions? There were two. So if you were here for one or both of them, please let me know by sending me a note. All right. So I'll be watching to see that. I think I recognize a couple of names. All right. So I'm going to start our session today, and I want to officially welcome you all to this course, which is called CAEL 203, Listening and Speaking. And the reason it's called Listening and Speaking is that it focuses on those tasks out of the CAEL test, okay? So I want to explain a few basics just related to using this platform for our session today, just so you know what to do and how things are working. So first of all, as you've probably figured out, you are not able to actually speak with me because your microphones are muted. And this is necessary to avoid lots of background noise that interferes with everything that we're doing. That means that the only way you can communicate with me is by using the questions box. Now, the way to access that is by clicking on that orange arrow. That opens up your GoToWebinar control panel, and you should see something called a questions box or a chat box. So please warm up your fingers right now if you haven't already done so, and send me a message saying hi and telling me where you are today. Also, before I continue, I want to just make sure that you know that we're joined here today by Megan. She is a colleague of ours at Paragon, and I see that she has sent you a couple of notes, okay? So if you haven't seen those notes, I'll just remind you that there will be a recording of this session that you can access afterwards, and Megan has put up a link for that, okay? So that might be useful for some of you. All right, carrying on here. I hate to bring up the topic, but occasionally people do have technical problems during the session. For example, suddenly my voice might cut out, or maybe you won't be able to see anything on screen. So if something like this should happen to you, and I hope it doesn't, but if it does, be sure to let us know. Send us a message right away. Megan may be able to help you. And if you're still having the same problem, we really recommend that you leave the session, open up your browser or get a hold of the Chrome browser and come back in using that, because that often solves technical problems, okay? But hopefully you won't have to worry about that. Now, I also recommend that you get some paper and a pen or a pencil so that you're able to make notes during the session today. And so you have a moment now to do that while I finish doing the introductory things here. Now, after the session today, you will receive an email, and that should come through about an hour after we finish up. And that email will have a couple of links for you. One link takes you to a survey, and I really urge you to complete the survey. It won't take long at all, and it just helps us to make sure that these webinars are as helpful as possible. So you can answer the questions and let us know what you liked about the webinar and what kind of improvements you'd like to see. Now, the other link is to some study materials that will help you review the things that we covered today. And there will be some documents in there that I'll be sharing with you today that you'll want to come back to and use again. I'll point them out as we get to them if I think of it. Okay, so if you have any other general questions about the things I've brought up, please let us know. Now you can see what I look like on screen here, and I'll just say a few words about myself. So I am an online instructor with Paragon Testing Enterprises, and Paragon is the company that manages and runs the CAEL test as well as CELPIP and LPI. So I have actually been associated with Paragon for a full 7 years now. And during that time, I was able to design and deliver a variety of workshops related to the CAEL test and the CELPIP test. And this is what I love doing more than anything, is helping test takers to really understand what the test is about and to feel completely prepared. We don't want you to have any nasty surprises on test day. In any case, you can see a list of my experience in education here. And altogether, I have over 20 years of experience teaching ESL, as well as teaching elementary school, and I've taught abroad. And yeah, I won't go through any more of that. But what I am hoping to do today is to make sure that you feel much more comfortable with part 3 of the CAEL test. And so we'll be focusing on listening and an integrated speaking task that goes with that listening in part 3. Okay, so a quick look at what we'll be covering today. So we're going to focus entirely on part 3 of the test, but I am going to start by doing a very quick review of how the full CAEL test is organized. From there, we'll have a closer look at part 3 and all of the work that you'll be asked to do there. And then we'll move on to work on the specific listening tasks. So the different types of listening tasks that you'll be dealing with. And then we will also have a look at the related speaking task. Now, hopefully there will be some time at the end for us to review the study materials as well. So starting now with our overview of the CAEL test, I always like to start at the beginning and let you know what that word CAEL stands for. And it stands for Canadian Academic English Language Test. And today we're looking at the computer edition. So this is the version of the test that everyone now does when they come to our official test centers. Now, one of the things that we are exceptionally proud of for the CAEL test is the fact that it is completely designed by Canadians, and therefore it really takes into account the Canadian university and college system, okay? And also, all parts of the test are completed on computer, even the speaking parts, which I think everyone is now quite accustomed to. But if you have questions or concerns about that, let us know. Now, another really interesting feature of our test, and something that is a little different from other academic tests, is that the CAEL is an integrated skills test. So this means that we don't first test all your speaking questions, and then all the listening, and then all the reading, and then all the writing, and do them all separately. It means that through most parts of the test, you might be asked, for example, to read something and then speak about what you read. Or you may listen to a lecture and then answer a question in writing about that lecture. So this is how we integrate the skills. In addition, it's a topic-based test, which means that each part of the test focuses on a different academic topic. I'll tell you a little bit more about that soon. Now, you probably know that CAEL is used primarily or mostly for people who are trying to get into Canadian universities and colleges, and it is now recognized by over 190 Canadian institutions. Now, it's also used by people who are trying to gain entry to some of our professional associations. So the ICCRC is related to immigration consulting. I believe it might also be used by the Real Estate Board of Canada and some other professional associations. Now, one of the things I love about the CAEL test is that it was designed after doing extensive research on the types of tasks that students are expected expected to do in their first year of undergraduate studies in a Canadian university or college. So every task on the CAEL test is modeled after something you would do in a Canadian classroom. This means that the result that you get on the test is a really strong indicator of how successful you're likely to be in your first year of post-secondary study in Canada related to your English level, right? I don't mean in relation to your grasp of the subject you're studying, but it indicates for you how easily or how difficult it might be for you to get through that first year with the level of English you show us on your test. And this is something that not all academic English tests are able to do very accurately. All right, so that's just an overview for you of some of the features of the test in general. Now, let's look at how the test is organized. So you can see here that there are 5 parts. Now, part 1 of the test up here is for speaking tasks only. So this is the only part of the test where there are independent tasks because they assess just that one skill of speaking. Now, in parts 2 and 3, we're integrating 2 different skills. So in part 2, it's reading and speaking, and in part 3, which we'll be looking at today, it's listening and speaking. Parts 4 and 5 get even more interesting because here we're integrating 3 different language skills: reading, listening, and writing. All right? Oh, I should just mention that there's a different topic for each of these integrated parts. So parts 2, 3, 4, and 5 are each on a different academic topic. Now, what I've done here is highlighted all the listening tasks for you in red. So you can see that there are no listening tasks until part 3, but then the remainder of the test includes them, okay? So this is what we're focusing on today, is your listening skills. Now, I'll just point out that each of our webinars in this series of 4 webinars focuses on a different part of the test. So yesterday we did the first webinar, which is called CAEL 201, which was all about speaking, and then 202 was about reading and speaking. Right now, we're looking at listening and speaking, and then later this afternoon, we'll be doing the final webinar in the course, or the program, whatever you want to call it, and this one will focus on writing skills. And by the way, we still have space there if you want to sign up for it. Okay, and it will begin at 3 o'clock Pacific time. Okay, so I already mentioned that this is a topic-based test, and you can see here how the topics change through parts 2 to 5. Now, on the topic of topics, I just want to mention that each topic is going to come from either the arts or the science faculty. And ideally, you'll have a mix of those topics on your test. So you can see here some of the most common subjects, but these are just a few examples. There are so many more than what you see here, all right? Also notice that each faculty has quite a broad range. So for example, in arts, it could be everything from criminology to music. And in science, you might do nutrition or biology, all right? So quite a range there of topics. Okay, thanks, Megan, for putting up that link to register. Now, let's talk about scoring. And I always like to tell people that it's very, very wise to get a really decent understanding of how the scoring is done and what score you need to get on the test. So in CAEL, there are 9 band scores that you can see here, ranging from 10 to 90. Now, after you write the test, you will receive a score report, and that will include individual scores for speaking, reading, listening, and writing. So there will be 4 separate scores, but you'll also get one broad overall score, which is a a combination of the 4 skills, which are equally weighted or equally put together to make up that overall score. Now, typically, the faculty or department that you're applying to, if that's the reason you're taking the test, will require a certain overall score. And you need to find out what that score is. I can give you a general idea. Most colleges and universities probably want to see you score a band 70 or higher. But there are some that will accept a 60 and others that will take an 80. All right. So make sure that you know what score you need, and be aware that different departments in one university might have different requirements. So if your friend applied to English and needed an 80 and you're applying to biology, you might need something different, right? All right. So are there any questions so far on all of this general information? If there are, please don't be shy. And I don't think I mentioned earlier that I really, really encourage you to use the questions box to interact with us. Megan is sitting there waiting eagerly for your questions and comments, and she'll certainly respond to as many as she can. And I also am watching them, and I like to share some of them with the group. So please don't be shy and be sure to be in touch with us throughout the session. We do love to hear from you. Okay, so we're going to now focus in on our topic for today, which is the listening tasks in part 3 of the test. Now, there are 2 different types of listening tasks, so we'll look at each one briefly. The short listening in part 3. Now, you may have 1 or 2 of these, and these are going to be somewhat informal. So it may be that your professor is explaining an assignment, or perhaps giving guidelines for some requirements or something along those lines. Now, this is going to be fairly short, so you're only going to have to answer 3 questions on this listening, more or less. Now, what's really useful for the listening part of the test is that you get some preview time before the audio begins. So when you start a new listening task, the first thing that happens is you'll see a timer counting down, and we'll show you what that looks like soon. And during that time, you're previewing the task, okay? And when that timer ends, the audio will automatically begin to play, and it'll play all the way through. You can't control it, you can't pause it, you can't rewind it or anything like that. It just plays through. And when it ends, then you'll see a new timer start, and that's your reviewing time. Okay, so depending on if you're doing a short or a long listening, these times will be different. For the short listening, you're going to have 30 seconds of preview time. You'll then listen to the audio, and then you'll have about 1 minute of reviewing time. And we'll talk a little more about what to do during these times very soon. What about the long listening? Again, you're going to have 1 or 2 of these in part 3. Now, this will be an academic lecture. All right, so it will be completely academic in nature. And this time, because it's longer, you're going to have about 11 questions. Now, also, because it's longer again, you're going to have more time beforehand. So you'll have a full 2.5 minutes of previewing time. Then the audio will begin, and then it'll end. And then you'll have 3 full minutes to review. Okay, Amara's asking me, is it possible to write important points? Will we get pencil and paper? And yes, the answer is that you will be provided with paper and something to write with. And you can use that throughout all parts of the test, okay? And Amara, I will be giving tips for both the short and the long listening. Just stay tuned, and you'll be, I hope, picking up some useful tips along the way. Okay, so for both of the listening task types, you'll see an instruction screen that looks something like this. So you can see at the top of the screen, this tells us this is for a short listening. Now, the first audio passage in part 3 will probably be a short listening, and it will be probably something about an aspect of university life. So you may hear a professor review a course syllabus, give instructions for a presentation. It could be a lab orientation, or they may be speaking informally about something else, but it won't be heavy academic language. Now, looking at this instruction screen, tell me what you see here that is really important to you as a test taker. So we're watching the questions box now, looking for your answers. What important information do you see on this screen? There are a few basic things that you want to pay attention to. Great. Palak and Amara are both talking about time. So you're told how much time you have, right? Another thing you're told is how many questions you're going to be dealing with. And here's where you get the information about timing. Okay, you're also told, so first, in this first one, 30 seconds, you're told how much time you have before you hear the audio. And then you're also told at the same time how much time you will get after the audio to make sure your questions are complete. All right. Now, the other important thing about this screen is that it gives you a moment, a second or two, to prepare yourself before you actually have to be really focused and concentrating. So, as I've mentioned, there are those 3 stages for each listening passage: previewing, listening, and reviewing. So on this screen, you haven't hit the first stage yet. You're not previewing yet. But as soon as you click this next button and go to the next page, your previewing time automatically starts to count down. All right. So this time on this page, you don't want to be here too long, but you want to use this time to get yourself organized, clear your mind, and be ready to really work as soon as you click that next button. All right. So make sure you're ready. Now, this is what you'll see when you move to the next screen. Now we're looking at a long listening. So I want to draw your attention to a few important features here. First thing on the left is while the audio is playing, you'll see this play bar on the left. Now, the little blue part shows you how much of the audio has played so far, and then you still have all of this time in the rest of the bar that still has to play. So we're at the very beginning here. Now, the questions are always on the right. So just as we saw for reading yesterday, in long listening, there's often up to about 5 question pages or screens, whereas for the short listening, you're only going to have 1 or 2. So you do have to be able to navigate back and forth from one question page to the next, and you can do that using the buttons up here. So either you click on a page number or you go back and forth using the arrows. You can do it however you like. You can mix it up. Now, you have all of, however much time it shows up here, that's how much time you have to complete all of this. So you want to keep your eye on this countdown timer and make sure that all of the questions have been answered before that timer hits 0. And in the meantime, you can move back and forth between the pages however you like until that timer hits 0. So once you click on that next button, presumably you've completed all your questions. Now, when you've finished the questions on one page, the tab turns green. So in this example here, we still have to answer questions on these other pages, but part 1 is complete. We don't need to worry about that. So again, keep your eye on this countdown timer. Make sure you've answered all the questions before the timer hits 0. And once it hits 0, it automatically goes to the next task. Now, this is what you want to see before your time runs out. So you can see here that all the tabs are green, which means all the questions have been answered, which in turn means you have an opportunity to earn a point for each of those answers. If you don't answer a question, you can't earn any points, right? Okay, so let's talk about previewing time. So here's what the screen looks like when you're in that first preview time before the audio. So the timer on the left tells us that this is preparation time. I'm interested to hear from you. What do you think you should be doing during this preparation time? So use your question box and send me your thoughts. What should you do during your preparation time before you hear the audio? Good idea. Palak is saying read all the questions, or Joy says preview them. Nerman says scan them. Good. Here's another point. Laya says make sure you understand the question. So everyone is focused on looking at the questions. Quidzia has added, look at what type of question it is. And I think Quidzia is thinking of something we learned yesterday that I'm going to be telling you about soon. Certain types of questions and knowing how to recognize them, right? So these are all good ideas. So what you want to be doing during your previewing time is looking at the questions and the answer choices, right? Maybe anticipate the kind of lecture you'll be hearing, main points, and so on. And thank you, Joy, this is really useful. Try to identify the key words in the questions, right? You may even want to write them down on your paper. So you don't have to remember the keywords necessarily because you'll be looking at the questions the whole time, but you might want to jot them down. Now, as soon as so imagine your previewing time has ended and now the audio is playing. So you can see the play bar on the left here. And this tells us again that we're still at the beginning of the audio. Okay, so I'm curious to know, I know that you're curious to know what the short listening sounds like. And so in a few minutes, we're going to play it, but let's just review a few more things first, right? So during your listening time, you will be able to look at all the questions and answer them as you listen to the audio. So you can flip back and forth if there's more than one page, but the idea is to answer while you're listening. Okay, remember you only get to hear the audio once. There is no transcript of the audio and you cannot pause the audio, nor can you decide when to start the audio. You don't have control over those things, okay? What you do have control over is which questions you want to be looking at as you're listening. And I can tell you that as a very general rule, the order of the questions is presented in the order that you'll hear the information, more or less, with a few small exceptions. Okay, so now we can see that our audio has finished because the message on the top tells us this, and also the blue has filled the white bar. Okay, so now you're starting your review time. What do you think you should be doing with your review time? So please use that question box and let me know. What should you be doing once the audio is done with the time that you have before this task is complete? So Laya's saying answer the questions. And yes, hopefully you've already answered most of the questions. And Amara's adding to that thought, make sure that you haven't missed any of the questions. So a very important thing to do during your review time is to go back through all the questions and make sure you've answered them all. And remember, those green tabs at the top will help with that. Okay. Okay, so before we listen to the audio, I want to just review the kinds of question types that you're going to be seeing on the test. And these are the same types that you saw for reading. So if you were at lesson 2 yesterday, you'll be familiar with this. And feel free to send notes about anything you remember as I show you the different question types. Okay, so there are 6 different types of questions. Now, what you're seeing here is the most common type of question that we're all familiar with if we've been in Canada for very long in a school situation. So this is a standard multiple choice question. And how many correct answers do you think there are to a question like this? Yes, thank you, Laya and Palek and Quidsia. Just one. And how do you know that for sure? If you were here yesterday, you'll know the answer to that. What what tells you? There's a hint here. Yes. So this, what we call the answer bubble, is round. Okay. Also, there's nothing in the instructions that tells you that you need more than one correct answer. Okay, so that's fine. We just click on the answer that we think is correct. And then we move on to a very similar type of question, multiple choice, multiple answer. So in this case, we have 2 clues that we need to select more than one correct answer. What are they? For those who were here yesterday, and even the new people, you may be able to pick up the clues. They're not too difficult. Yes, first of all, the instructions tell us how many answers to select. And thank you, Amara, we have square answer bubbles instead of round. So be careful when doing multiple choice to check to see if you're selecting one or more than one. Okay, so a fill in the blank question has a blank somewhere in a sentence, and your job is to look at those instructions to find out what goes in the blank. In this case, it's a number from the passage. Typically, it's going to be a word or a few words, okay? It might be a name, a number, a place. Be careful with your spelling here and just copy directly from the, you'll be listening. So you won't know if it's a number, you don't know if you should write, if for example, if it's 12, should you answer 1, 2, or type out 12 in letters? Both are acceptable, but if you type out the word, make sure you spell it correctly, okay? All right, so next we have drop down. This is where we have a blank in the middle of a sentence, and you will click on this little triangle to expose your answer choices and select the best one. Now, for ordering, you're going to look carefully at the instructions. So in this type of a question, you're told to put things in some kind of order, and you're going to click on each item and drag it to the correct spot in this list. Look carefully at the instructions so you know, in this case, it's chronological, but you need to know it's oldest on top and most recent on the bottom. And finally, we have matching questions. This is where you have different categories and you have to put the answers into the correct category. And when you complete this, it will look like this. Okay, any questions about these listening question types or anything else we've talked about so far? Because we're moving into our listening practice now. Okay, so if you do have questions or concerns, send them at any time. So I want to start by reviewing some key listening skills with you. And as you know, if you were here yesterday, these types of skills are very similar to what we learned about in reading. So if you were here yesterday, you might be able to tell me what these 3 skills are. We have general meaning, specific information, and inference. What do each of these skills mean? Anybody want to try to explain that? I'm watching the questions box. Yes, thank you, Quidzia. So I've just had from Quidzia information that general meaning means looking for broader ideas when you're listening, or listening for broader ideas. Okay, and that's right. Specific information means looking for certain pieces of information, right? And anybody want to guess inference? Yeah, inference means um, understanding or being able to guess what the correct answer is from what you learned about the topic through the reading. In other words, the answer isn't clearly stated, not the reading, sorry, but the listening, okay? So here you can see what the actual definitions of each of these listening skills is. So general meaning is where you're going to hear an answer to a question by understanding a few sentences at least in the listening passage. So you'll have to put the information together from one or two or three sentences, or perhaps more, to find the correct answer. For a specific information question, you will be able to clearly hear the answer in a word or a phrase or a sentence at most. And this is what we're all the most comfortable with. And then in an inference question, you're going to have to make an educated guess on the answer based on what you learned and interpreted from that lecture that you heard. Okay, I'm just looking at your question, Quidzia. Will the answers be in order, like for matching? I'm not quite sure I understand what you mean. And Palak has said, so in part 3, there can be all multiple questions or mixed questions. Oh, do you mean multiple choice? Yeah, in part 3, there will be a variety of question types for any listening passage or reading passage. So I think you're saying that in the pretest, all the questions were multiple choice questions. Very interesting. Yeah, Amara, you're asking if the questions will be in order as what you hear in the listening. And in general, yes, but there may be one or two questions that you feel aren't in order because they're an inference question, for example. Okay, those are good questions. Thank you. Okay, let's get in and do some practice. In a minute, we're going to listen to a short listening passage. But first, let's prepare for it. So imagine you're actually writing the CAEL test. You have 30 seconds of prep time before the audio begins to play. What should you be doing with this time? And here are your questions. What do you think you should be doing? And we've talked about this. Okay, yeah, Amara is saying skim. So skim those questions. So have a look at all the questions and answer choices, right? And Quidzia says key information. Right. Look for keywords or phrases that you can listen for in the audio, right? So before we listen, let's go through each question and identify any keywords that we think will help us hear the answer. Starting with question 1. Fill in the blank with one number from the lecture. Dr. Mortimer believes that Mr. Sheen, the teaching assistant, will play an important role in helping students learn material covered in unit blank. All right, what are the key words here? Things you want to listen to that will help you hear the answer. Tell me your thoughts. Yes, one number. Thank you, Palak. So that's the first thing, is we know now that we have to listen for one number. Now, what else? What other key phrases or words? Yes, Dr. Mortimer. And then, yeah, so Palak is suggesting that Dr. Mortimer is a key word. And I think he introduces himself at the beginning as the speaker, right? So not as important as Mr. Sheen, because this is the topic of the sentence, right? And as you can see, because I've highlighted it for you already, we're listening for which unit number what, as we can see by the blank. So listening for those words should help you locate the answer. Exactly. Amara says the name of the chapter or the unit. Okay, let's move on to unit 2. There's one key phrase here that will really help you hear the answer. What do you think it is? And it's not Dr. Mortimer. Yes, palette, good job. Curious bunch. So that's what you want to listen for. And what about question 3? What's the key phrase here that will help you hear the good? Laya got it. The GCMS machine, whatever that is. Okay, so this is an example of what you can be doing during your previewing time to help you identify answers when the audio begins to play. Of course, as you're reading the questions, you're also trying to understand the intention of the question so that you can answer it more easily. So we've done that work. Let's proceed now and move on. Okay, as you go through each question, you should also check your answer choices. So I think I've mentioned that. It's important to know what the options are. So now, finally, I'm going to play you the audio file. This is this one is about 2.5 minutes long. And in the actual test, you're following along and clicking on or typing in answers as you listen. But for our practice today, you're going to have to use paper and a pen or a pencil. So I hope you have those ready. I'm going to play the audio file for you now, and I'm hoping that you will be able to hear the answers. Now I have to play a little bit with my audio. So at the end of the audio, there may be a delay as I get back to you. Are you all ready? Okay, good. Yeah, Amara, you don't, yeah, on the real test, once the audio has ended, you do have time to click on the answers, but then you're relying on your memory. So what you really want to do is answer as you're listening. Good luck. Here we go.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Introduction to Forensic Science, or FOSS 100. I'm Dr. Mortimer, and I'll be your instructor for the course. I also want to point out from the beginning that although the course material and the learning objectives may seem a bit daunting, help is available. We have a wonderful array of resources to help you understand and apply the scientific principles you'll be learning about, including a well-equipped section in the library. If you are really into checking out some pioneering methods and diagrams that are not yet available online, interlibrary loans are available on request, and they're usually accommodated within 5 business days. I'd say that the reading list at the end of the course syllabus is a good place to start. We have a world-class chemistry lab where you can learn anything from doing a simple TLC test to witnessing the scientific wonders performed by a GCMS machine. Now, you will need our teaching assistant, though, especially for booking a visit during Unit 2. That's Mr. Sheen, the assistant, over in the corner there. You're also encouraged to join the study group organized for this course. The group is organized and run by half a dozen 3rd and 4th year students in chemistry and physics, and they aptly call themselves the Curious Bunch. I believe that first-year students can learn a great deal from their study groups, which are held every Thursday, I believe, and also from their case blog called The Sign of 44, where you can find an archive of the cases listed in the current and previous syllabi. Okay, any questions so far?
Professor, you mentioned a GCMS machine and
and a TLC method. I was just wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about what they are. Good question. Sorry, I should have clarified earlier. GCMS stands for gas chromatography mass spectrometry. It is a powerful tool. It not only separates a mixture of substances into individual components, but also analyzes and identifies what the components are. And TLC stands for thin layer chromatography, which is a much simpler but faster way of identifying compounds.
All right, so I hope that was audible for you. I'm not sure how clear it was, but I see some people were answering questions here, so I think hopefully it was clear enough that you could hear that. I'm just checking my volume now, but I'm pretty sure it is up on full. So it's the best I can do for the audio. Yes, sorry about that for those of you who couldn't hear it clearly. I will try to solve that for next time. Yeah, okay. But many of you are coming through with answers, so I do appreciate you working through the audio problems. Okay, so I think most of you heard that the answer for question 1 is Unit 2, right? And for question 2, many of you have written in correctly to say that the answer to number 2 is a study group. And for question 3, I think 3 is the hardest. Ooh, good job, Ambreen. Ambreen got it. So did Laya and Nerman. Excellent. And let's see, Palak, you got it as well. Yes, so for number 3, it's what questions, okay? So this is kind of a warm up for you on what's involved in listening. And what we're going to be doing next is we're going through, so here's what the answers or what it looks like when you've selected your answers. And what we're going to be doing very soon is going into the longer listening and doing a closer analysis of how we're getting to our answers. Okay? Okay. So I hope everyone's ready to proceed. If you have questions or concerns, let us know. So let's move on to some harder questions for the long listening. This is quite a long lecture, so we can't listen to the whole thing during the lesson. Instead, I'm going to focus in on 2 questions. For each question, we'll listen to a short excerpt where the answer is. So in other words, we're doing a lot of the work for you because we're already isolating the portion of the lecture that has the answer. Isn't that nice? But in the real test, it's all up to you because you're listening to the whole lecture, looking at all the questions and trying to figure out how to answer them, right? Okay, so this lecture is about economic models and how they help us. So let's start with question 4. The question says, what is one way of grouping economic models that the professor mentions? And the answer choices are visual and mathematical, simple and complex, Cobb-Douglas and Hexler-Olin, or principal and sophisticated. So to start off, as we've just practiced, what are the key words you can spot in the question that may help you hear the answer as you listen? So let me know. Let me know. Amara, I'm looking at your comment about people speaking very quickly, and I really understand that issue. And so I'm not sure if you're referring to my speaking or the speaking on the audio file, but I would suggest to you that you need to do lots of listening practice between now and whenever your test is to become accustomed to that speaking speed that you're hearing on the audio files in the lesson today. That's what you're going to be dealing with in the test. So good luck to you with that. Okay, thank you to everyone who's been writing in. And yes, grouping economic models is the most important key phrase that will help us hear the answer. Okay. And Laya says, well, any of the words mentioned in the response, yes, but we have to be careful with that because all of the words we see in the answer choices may be mentioned at some point in the audio file, but that doesn't mean they're the right answer, right? You have to hear them in the context of grouping economic models. So that's the key. All right. So we know what we're listening for. What we're going to do now is listen to a short excerpt from the lecture. And I ask you to listen carefully for the answer as you keep the words grouping economic models in mind, because they should help you hear the answer. Okay. And this is a different speaker. I'm hoping it will be clearer for you. Here we go.
Depending on the perspective you take, economic models can be grouped in various ways. For instance, just from the way that the models are presented, we can distinguish between visual models and mathematical models. Mathematical models include optimization problems where consumers try to maximize utility subject to their budget constraints. Visual models, such as the graph we just saw, present things graphically using flowcharts and diagrams. Another distinguishing feature that differentiates models is what kind of data they analyze. For example, some models use previously observed data to simulate economic phenomena and to answer what-if questions by manipulating certain variables. Other models are anchored in assumptions and observations for forecasting and predicting the future relationship of the variables. All right.
Okay, here I am. Was that any clearer? I hope so. No one's been complaining, so that gives me hope. All right, and everyone is sending in the correct answer. Well done. Visual and mathematical. So here's a transcript of what you just heard. Now, in the actual test, you're not going to see the transcripts of audio files. We're only doing this in our webinar today for teaching purposes. So again, you will never see the audio transcript during the test. That's a no-no, okay? Also remember, I've helped you out by isolating this short excerpt, and that won't happen in the test as well. So we're giving you a lot of help here. Now, if you look at the transcript, you may be able, if you were having trouble finding the answer, you should be able to find the information that you need here. And it's in this box of text, in this phrase, right? And then this is a very big phrase. And then I've isolated the smaller phrase that contains the answer. All right? So the point of this exercise is the first sentence talks about grouping economic models. The first sentence here in this short excerpt. Now that alerts us to the possibility that the answer might be coming up soon. Now the information we need is in the second sentence, which I've put in the red box. So now that we have found the answer, can you tell me which listening skill is most useful here? Would you say that you should use general meaning, specific information, or inference questions? Or inference skills. And here's just a reminder of what they are. Now, yes, thank you. I've already had, wow, you guys are good. I've had lots of people answering correctly. It's a specific information skill that you need here. The question is asking about something the professor mentions or says in the lecture. So we know that we're not looking for an inference skill here. And since the question is asking us for something quite specific, a way of grouping models, it's a pretty safe bet that it's a specific information skill that we need to use here. Now, notice too that we heard the answer in one phrase, so that confirms it. Okay? All right. So for specific information questions, the method is the same as we saw in reading yesterday. So first of all, what kind of information do you need to locate? Second, can you recognize the section of the listening that might have the answer? Third, which specific information provides the answer? And finally, maybe you can eliminate some incorrect answers to help you find the answer choice that best restates that information. Okay, so we're going to move on now, and I'd like to look at one more listening question, and then we'll get into speaking skills. So this is question 9, and it's the same listening passage. This question says, which of the following statements would Danny Roderick, the Harvard professor, probably agree with? And the answer choices are, some models are superior to others in predicting future. Economic models always fall short in explaining an economy. Economic models should be as rigid as those used in biology, or some economic models are not solid in theoretical foundation. So what are the key words in this question that you should listen for as you hear the lecture? Let me know. Any thoughts? What are the key words here? Yes, good job, Laya. Danny Roderick, right? Now, another question. Do you expect to hear the specific information you need to help you choose the right answer? And there's a hint about this in the question. Right, and people are saying no, and they're telling me what kind of question it is. Now the hint is it yes, so the word probably tells us that we're going to be doing a little bit of guessing here. It's not a statement of fact, okay? So we're not going to hear the answer clearly stated in the text. We may actually have to do some thinking about what we learn to find the right answer. So listen carefully to this short excerpt from the lecture and see if you can choose or infer the best answer based on what you hear. Hold on a sec.
Economic experiments are often critiqued due to concerns of their internal and external validity. Particularly, they may not be applicable to true economic behavior. This all other things unchanged assumption, or ceteris paribus, if we use a fancy Latin phrase here, does not hold true at all in real life. So it's not surprising that Danny Roderick, a Harvard professor of economics, said that models are never true, but there is truth in models, as they reflect a simplified view of the world.
All right, here I am. So that was a pretty short excerpt, I think you will all agree. And I have some answer choices coming in. Hold on. Yeah. Good. You know, you guys are doing so well. I'm very impressed. A lot of you should feel quite confident for the listening part of the test. Okay, so yes, so the correct answer actually is the second one. Economic models always fall short in explaining an economy. So here's the transcript again, and I'll just briefly show you, for those who are having trouble finding the answer, where it is. So the information that you need is in the last part of this excerpt here. And now that you know where it is, it may help you to recognize that the correct answer is the second one, right? From this excerpt, we can see that Roderick feels that economic models may have their uses, but they ultimately fail in the real world. So we can draw the logical conclusion that Roderick agrees that economic models fall short in explaining real economies. Now, you need to know that fall short means to not succeed or not fail. You probably need to know that in order to confidently guess the correct answer. Okay. So, summarizing for inferencing, again, it's the same method you saw for reading. So first, see if you could find a clue in the question that helps you know you need to use your inference skills. Once you know that, think about what you learned about the topic through the listening that relates to the question. And then think logically to draw a conclusion that will help you choose the right answer. And don't forget, eliminating answers that you know are incorrect will help you decide which one is correct. Okay, so we're going to move on now and very quickly look at some overall listening strategies that could help you with any listening tasks in the test. And these are things that you're probably very, very familiar with from your ESL classes. So first, whenever you're doing a listening task, when you're answering questions about some kind of listening passage, always preview the questions, right? Try to find keywords and identify what listening skill you might need to use. And I've just talked about identifying keywords. And after you have listened and answered, it's very important to go back and review your work. Make sure you've answered every question. And if you have extra time, check your answers and make sure that you're satisfied with them. Now, everybody wonders about taking notes. And yes, it's always useful to take notes when you're listening. But remember that in the CAEL test, you are also answering the questions as you listen. So if you get distracted writing lots of stuff down, you may miss key things that will help you answer some of the questions. It really depends on how you work. So I strongly recommend that you experiment with this at home using our free sample test or one of our practice tests. Experiment with taking notes and not taking notes and see how you do. At the same time, we have to remember that you will be referring back to this lecture when you answer the speaking question. So notes could be useful, but not too many. And from time to time, you may come across words and phrases that aren't familiar. Don't worry about them unless you think they are crucial. And if they are, then work at understanding what they mean based on the sentence, the context, right? But otherwise, just let it go. Okay, so this will be in your study materials that you'll get after the lesson today. What to do with your previewing time, what to do while you're listening, and what to do with your review time. I'm not going to go through all of these now because we've talked about all of these steps, and you can look at this afterwards at your leisure as much as you like. If you have questions about any of this, please let us know, okay? Okay. I'm getting a little tickle in my throat here. So we're moving on now to speaking on the long listening. And you may be familiar with this checklist, especially if you were with us yesterday for our first few lessons or either of them. Your speaking tasks are scored by our trained and certified CAEL raters. This checklist helps you understand how the scoring is done. Now, these last 3 points here in the last section on the bottom right, these are specific to this one task that you're doing in part 3, and all of the other categories apply to all of the speaking tasks. Okay. So just very, very quickly, delivery skills, this covers how you speak. So your volume and speed, how often you pause, and of course your rhythm, pronunciation, and intonation. Accuracy of language relates to your vocabulary and your grammar. So for vocabulary, it's really useful to show a broad range of academic language throughout your response. The ability also to select suitable words and phrases as you're speaking. For grammar, you want to demonstrate that you can use a variety of sentence types and lengths. And don't forget how important it is to use linking words. Okay, for content, this is all about your ideas. So make sure that you develop each idea as much as possible using what you learned in the lecture. You want to stay on topic, use an appropriate academic tone, and make sure also that you start with some kind of opening statement and finish with some kind of closing statement. Task fulfillment means fill all of the speaking time, and that's 2 minutes, and try to give a satisfactory, complete response to the question. Now, in terms of using that lecture in your response, these 3 points are really important. So you want to make sure first that you actually use information from the lecture to develop your ideas, and also that you rephrase that information in your own words. This is very important. Finally, try to make sure that the information you use is relevant to the question. So this checklist will also be in the study materials that you receive later today, and it's very useful. I recommend that you record your responses and then analyze your performance yourself using this checklist. Okay, here's your practice question. Now, the lecture and the question are from our free sample test, which you might be familiar with, and you'll probably notice that the question relates to the long audio passage we just did about economic models, okay? During the test, remember, you've just listened to the audio and answered questions about it. So, it will be familiar to you and the question should make sense to you. Okay, there are a few important things on the screen here. So first of all, your time, right? So you'll usually have 1 minute of prep time, 2 minutes of speaking time. Notice also that you have 2 tabs here. So you can switch back and forth between the tabs at any point during your prep and speaking time, as many times as you'd like. There's no restrictions there. So let's see. So right now we're on the question page. Let's see what happens when we click on the lecture notes page. So you can see here that we are now looking at notes summarizing the main ideas from that lecture we just listened to, and we're still looking at the question and the timers, right? So you can just go back and forth as you like. Now, while you're looking at the lecture notes, you can't hear the lecture again. You can't see the questions and answers that you already did, but you can at least look at the lecture notes. Now, back to the questions page. I'll point out a few other things for you. So the instructions remind you that you can use these tabs to move around. It also tells you that you really need to use the information from the lecture, but don't copy. In other words, don't repeat exactly word for word what you hear in the lecture. You need to rephrase things. This is very important. And then you're told how you'll be assessed. So the content, your language, and how you use the information from the lecture. Okay? Now, let's also look at the question. Hang on a sec. Yeah. So the question is in 2 parts, and this isn't always the case. So you always need to read each question carefully during the test to figure out what you have to deal with in your reply. Now, you have 60 seconds to prepare your response. So you've learned that your response will be scored on content, accuracy of language, and how you use the source material. So what do you think you should be doing now in your 60 seconds of prep time to get a good score on your response? So you should have some ideas, especially if you were at yesterday's lesson. What can you do with your prep time? Send us your ideas, please. Oh, Laya says, write an outline of your response. Sharam says, come up with a good introduction. I love these ideas, both Excellent. I can add a few things. Okay, so first of all, you look at that question and make sure you understand exactly what you're supposed to talk about. Go back to those lecture notes and remember all of the main points from the lecture. Otherwise, you may forget something. And then you've got to try to find any information in those lecture notes that responds to the question, because that may help you. Also, use your memory. What else can you remember that will help you give a nice full response to the question? And then put your notes in order, as Laia mentioned. You maybe will jot down different things, and then you could number them in a logical order. Okay. Okay, so moving on. Oh, finally, yeah, this is so important. So you may have jotted things down directly from the lecture, but try to think of ways to say them in your own words, right? You really need to show off your vocabulary and come up with a good opening statement. So I can hear you all saying, oh, how are we going to do all that in 60 seconds? It's impossible. And you can't really do all of this in 60 seconds. But what you can do is practice doing all of these steps at home in more time, and then learn how to do them faster and faster, and learn which ones you could leave out, which ones really help you to perform well. So as we say, practice makes perfect. You're going to practice all of these steps and then find a method that is most productive for you during the test. Okay, so let's figure out how I can help you with that. So let's work on the opening statement now, okay? Or actually, sorry, we're not working on the opening statement. I want you to just think about how you're going to organize your notes. So ask yourself these questions when you're looking at the test question. What do you need to talk about, and how should you organize your notes? You may remember that you have to talk about two things, right? So what are economic models is one thing. How do they help us understand the economy? So why not organize your notes into two sections like this? And this will help you gather information quickly, okay? So in the real test, you would first go back to the lecture notes, which are here on the left for you, and you'd remember the main points, think back to the audio passage, see what else you can remember. Well, we can't do those steps here because we're running out of time, but I have a short excerpt for you. So I'm going to play this for you. See if you can pick out any information here that can help you with the first question. What are economic models? Okay.